Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello again.
and this is number 88 in Sounding the Shadows. 88, which of course is described as two fat ladies by the bingo callers, which is very rude.
Well, it's also the year, it's also the age my mum was when she died. And I was just thinking, bingo then was called Housey Housey in our house. So
Oh
it
right,
was a
yes.
slightly low-key
Yeah.
version of the game, I think.
That is
really.
going back a bit, isn't
Yes,
it?
well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going back a bit, absolutely.
Well, we've had quite a lot of emails. I think we're still catching up with them, really.
We
Um,
are.
we-
Yeah, and some of them...
There's some sad ones sometimes. There's one from a friend of ours, someone we know quite well, really. And he says, I think he's really talking about having felt pretty useless all his life, really. And he says, I'm not a speaker or a preacher. I'm no good at children's or youth work. I'm not practical and able to make myself useful around the building. And then he says, rather rudely, but absolutely accurately, his practical skills are a notch below mine. Not musical, unable to play any instrument beyond the triangle. Not a singer. And he says, I'm a pretty comprehensive something or other of church-based uselessness. And he says, can you leave you feeling a bit of a square peg? All I was ever good at was clowning around doing sketches in church socials. Oh, and I was church treasurer for a number of years, probably the only substantial contribution I made. And let me just say to this person, who we know who it is, that for the last probably 12 years, he has supported us.
That's right.
And I don't know what anyone else thinks of him, and I know what he thinks of himself, but we are very, very pleased and proud that he is our friend. So go and boil your head and
Adrian.
look in the mirror and say, I am a very supportive and useful person. Right.
Well, he actually did say that he then remembered that he was part of the body and that maybe there was a significance there. And I'll tell you what happened to me. It brought back one of the most vivid memories, Adrian, I've had for a long time. My dad was church treasurer for years and years and years. And every Sunday evening, he would put on the thick cloth onto the dining room table. And then he would sit down with the church books. And I can see this quiet man who actually never had a very high opinion of himself ever, and never realised that he was very significant in any area. And he would just be adding up these long columns of these tiny little figures.
And this was, of course, pre-laptop days,
Pre
wasn't it?
anything
Any of
really,
those things,
pre-calculator.
Yeah.
It was all added up in his mind. And I know he was taken for granted, and I know nobody ever thought all that much of it. But my goodness, the contribution that he will have made to that church over the years, will have been jolly well noticed in heaven.
He loved the role, didn't he?
He was very proud.
I do remember you saying that even the changing of a plug was quite a complicated thing.
Well, it was.
First you had to cover the table with newspaper.
You did.
Then you fetched the plug. Then you fetched the toolbox. You took the anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
Yes.
quite
Yeah.
meticulous,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Because last week we were talking about negative culture, weren't we? And we had a couple of responses to that.
Yeah, we did. We were talking about it being more than a few bad apples, a negative culture. And a friend of ours said a picture of baskets of apples which need the bad ones removed and thrown to the geese, who, she says, love bobbing for them, and has a picture of the geese for us. Not quite sure where that takes us, but as with everything she's ever sent us, that is so lovely. Thank you.
It is, and maybe there is some deep significance. Maybe there's a sermon there, Adrian, that when you throw the bad apples out there have been... No, I don't think we will go
Let's
there.
move on.
There is one other email we had, though, about this culture thing. And, we've had two emails, actually, this week. One from somebody talking about the sadness of the bullying in his church that he experienced, and now another pastor has experienced in the same place, a culture of bullying. But this other person wrote talking about how she hoped that there would be developed a culture of kindness in the church. And I thought that was so lovely. I mean, she says, we recognise kindness in others and it brings out the best in us. And she talks about She's been very poorly in her life, and she talks about one of the kindest people she ever met being her consultant at Salisbury Hospital. And though he must look after hundreds of people, when he's with you, he makes you feel you are the most important person in the world, and that he'll do all he can to make things better for you. And he's universally loved by his patients. But she makes the point that, and I've always felt this actually, that that's what happened when Jesus was with people individually. You know, that he made them feel special, and he made it possible for them to feel they could be the best of themselves.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true? I think it is.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure some of them were amazed at the amount of time he gave and the way he looked at them. I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
No.
But there must have been something about discovering you were absolutely soaked into the mind of somebody who was listening to what you were saying.
Well, I always felt with this poor woman called the woman taken in adultery that when he said go and sin no more, she kind of thought it was possible, you know, because of that belief in her. I don't know. But she does finish it by saying, what would our churches look like if we had such a culture of kindness? It begins with me and you.
Yeah.
And of course that's true.
I'm afraid it does. It begins with me and you. And the other thing I promised I'd do this week was read a joke sent to me by somebody else who I've actually known on and off for a long, long time. And I'm going to sort of read it to you now that I've got it into my head. It is an old joke, but I haven't heard it for a long, long time. So you've got to pay attention. Right. Once there were two prawns named Fred and Christian. They were best friends. One day they were swimming along their usual route to the sea, just chatting, when Fred sighed and said, "Oh, I wish I was a shark. Then I would never have to be scared of anyone eating me." Well, it just so happened that at that very moment a magic cod was passing by and said, "Your wish is granted." And lo and behold, Fred turned into a shark and excitedly turned around to Christian. But Christian, terrified, had swum away home as fast as he could. Fred followed him back to his house, but nothing he could say could persuade Christian to open his door. Fred was devastated, and he concluded that being a shark was not worth losing his best friend over. So he searched frantically for months and finally found the magic cod. "Please, please turn me back," he said. "I want to be a prawn again." The magic cod nodded with great gravitas and solemnity, and Fred was indeed returned to being a prawn. Ecstatic, Fred zipped happily over to Christian's house and began knocking on the door. Christian was hesitant, though. Fred bellowed enthusiastically through the door, "It's me! It's okay! It's okay! It's me! Let me in! It's Fred!" Christian, shaking, replied, "You're a shark now. You'll eat me." But Fred called back, "No, it's okay. I found cod. I'm a prawn again, Christian." But don't say I don't ever do anything for you, that person who sent it to me. I read that with great care, I can tell you. And thank you very much.
You did.
For sending
It's
it.
probably the one thing that people will remember from all these months of us sitting here every week talking about things. They'll remember that joke.
Maybe they will. Well, the other thing I was thinking about this week, and I don't know what you think about it, is that, I mean, it hasn't been great recently. We've had some difficult things, haven't we? Just recently, one or two things to handle and to face.
Yeah.
And I was thinking this morning, it wouldn't be that bad a thing, would it, to remember some of the things that have been given to us. And I was remembering that old story, a sort of fairy story about the traveller who meets an old lady who, in return for help, it's a fairy story, I think, gives him a number of gifts to carry in his bag, and he's no idea what they're for. But as time goes by on his journey, he discovers why they were given to him. And earlier today, I was telling someone about one of those, which is mine, which is very important to me, and that is the discovery I made after I had a crack up years ago, which is, as I've said so many times, sounds so pale sometimes, that God is nice and he likes me. And every now and then I take that little gift out of my bag and I look at it, and it brings me enough momentary resurrection to get back on track. So I am immensely grateful for that.
And the interesting thing, is that it is a treasure, a little treasure, isn't it? Something you were given all that time ago, but you've never ended up thinking, well, I may have thought that then, but I certainly don't think that now. It's remained really true and strong in you, hasn't it? And something that, as you say, you can kind of bring out and
it's been a way of a travelling aid for
a travelling aid,
35 years. That's right.
Because some things you kind of remember in a way, and they are very special, and then something can happen that really throws everything all over the place in your head. And I was thinking, Adrian, after I'd met you, and I'd never met anybody like you, I'd never met anybody who appeared to actually know Jesus in a way I had never even thought about, really. And you told me what to do. You said, well, if you want to follow Jesus...
This is a long time ago.
You were a very young evangelical...
I know.
You were what you were. And you said to me, what you do is you go and you give your life to Jesus. So this was because at that time, it was very specific, wasn't it? You said the prayer and then you were in. So I thought, well, that's what I want more than anything. And so when I went home that Christmas, and I'd met you in the September, and it was snowing and cold, and I thought, I won't tell my parents. I need to go and find somewhere where I can do this. So I knew that there was a little chapel somewhere fairly near to where I lived that wasn't anything to do with the church my parents went to. Heaven forbid I should do something public. And so I went and found this little chapel on the Sunday evening, and I went in, and it was very small. And I said to this poor girl, I say poor girl because I think it must have been awful for her, really. I'm sorry, that's our phone going,
that's
but we're jolly well going to carry on. And it must have been dreadful for her, because I think I probably said something like, I've come to give my life to Jesus, and then burst into tears, and I think cried solidly for some time. And she got somebody else as well, and I don't remember too much about it, except that it was extraordinarily special to me, and I think was the beginning of changing my life. Well, when we'd become close and you came to meet my parents in Norwich, I said, I'm going to show you this church.
Yeah.
And it wasn't there.
No, that's
it
right.
honestly wasn't there.
It had disappeared.
It had disappeared.
Yeah.
Several years later, once you'd started speaking and all the rest of it, we were invited to this huge church in Norwich to do an evening. And on the wall in the corridor of this church, I suddenly saw a picture of my little chapel, this funny little tiny place. Yeah. And I went and read the stuff, and it told me that that's where they'd started. But actually from there, they'd gone to another building, and from there, they had grown as a church. Yeah. So it was real. And now it was as kind of proof of it. Yeah. But it had sort of... I couldn't lean on my funny little chapel, but I could lean on what happened that night.
The irony of that, of course, is that I'm not sure I would say that to anyone nowadays. I mean, I was so much a sort of template evangelical then, that's what you said and what you did. Now I might kind of circuitously or vaguely hope we arrive at that place in a different kind of way. But if I hadn't been like that then, we might not have married. We might not have had the best gift. Well, you might not agree with me, but from my point of view, having had a friend for 52 years who... And we've loved each other and looked after each other and had the odd difficulty like everybody does. But we've been very good friends for all that time. So it was a great gift.
Well, because what happened was I wrote to you and told you what I'd done, and you had actually been so unhappy at theatre school, you had thought you wouldn't go back.
That's right.
And then because of what happened with me, you did come back.
That's right.
So that is part of the story.
So there we are. You better go and turn that phone off, otherwise the entire body of people who listen to this will be joining us. And I was also thinking about our friend Paul Taphouse, who we have mentioned before, but Paul Taphouse, who we scraped off the pavement one day. I won't go into the whole story. And he had
he had an epileptic fit. That's why you were scraping it off.
Yeah,
he
had an epileptic
or
fit, and he had learning difficulties. And I think we thought we'd done a good thing, but actually, he came to see us just about every Wednesday evening for the rest of the next 20 years, I think. And he was such a gift to us.
He was.
Such a lesson. He was so kind and so solid.
He was.
And we mustn't forget our children.
No, of course we're not.
We've had 4 children.
Forget our children.
And,
no.
In the odd, there has been the odd time when perhaps we've, fallen out with at odd times with one or the other any given time. But we really love them, and they really love us. And I'm so grateful for that. I cannot tell you.
I was thinking our daughter and son-in-law are at the stage with their baby where they long for sleep.
Yeah,
they long for sleep as something that is a distant, glorious memory. Days when they slept.
Yeah, that's right.
And I do remember, Adrian, when we had one of our children going through the terrible twos, and I knew that you had to affirm them, that was what was really, really important. And the only time I really felt I could affirm them was when they were in bed asleep. And then I would look at them because I did love them with so much love, but it was the only time I could look and think, oh, you are wonderful. Yeah. So, but yes,
that wasn't
of course,
the only time,
gifts.
but yeah.
No.
But I remember doing that too. Especially the first one, who took so long to get to sleep that by the time he did get to sleep, I had to really work at looking at him and thinking, "Oh, I do love you," but I did love him. I did love him. I still love him. And what else was I thinking? Oh well, actually, now we're sitting here, over this last 2 years, I think the absolute privilege of being able to do these recordings and to hear back from people.
Yes,
and to make contact with
who've let us into their lives a little bit.
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
And it's rather similar to the other privilege we've had over the last, certainly the last 10 years, and much of our married lives, of praying with people and listening to people, and again being allowed into people's lives, and sometimes not being able to help practically at all, but at least being open to hearing what's happening to people.
I mean, what I'm thinking, Adrian, even as we're talking about these things, they're very particular to us, but everybody's got some things that are there to help them through their journey. Like you started by saying about these gifts that you carry in your bag. You don't always you can feel your bag's a bit empty sometimes, and I think the person who wrote to us the very first email we read today probably feels he hasn't got a lot in his bag.
Yeah.
But it's worth just hunting around in there.
But God has given him to us. I need to keep saying that to him.
Yes, you do.
I did make a list. I'm sure you could add to this list of the gifts Jesus had, things that might have kept him going. One was his mother, who sounds an interesting character when you think of the wedding at Cana. And the sound of his father's voice saying to him, "Look, this is my son," or saying to the others, "This is my son. I'm very pleased with him." That kind of thing can take you a long, long way.
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it, Adrian? I mean, because we put this strange voice into God, and we make some of these moments so kind of romanticized, if you like. But that moment in baptism, when, I mean, people actually heard it, but for many of us it's a voice inside, isn't it? Just a sudden knowledge that it's okay, we are loved, and God actually, as you said right at the beginning, likes us. Yeah,
and the idea of God saying, "This is my boy." I don't know if you met him.
Exactly.
He's doing so well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I thought about those moments when he was shocked by something positive, like the faith of the Roman centurion who said, "No, don't even bother to come back to my house with me, because I know you. Oh, you just say it will be so, and it will be so." And the thrill of finding Oh, lots of things. Friends and food around the fire, the things that he obviously really enjoyed. Can you think of any others?
Can I? Well, of course I can, really. I mean, I don't know. The joy in the faces of those women when he said, "Let the children come to me," is something I think, they've always felt such second-class citizens, and they're shushing their children and telling them, like so many mothers in so many churches have done over the centuries, just shush, just shh, just shush. And Jesus, the disciples following the rules, and Jesus saying, "No, let them come to me." And I've always thought, yes, it was lovely for the children, but oh my goodness, it must have been lovely for those mums.
Yeah. I'm glad he had Martha and Mary and Lazarus, the people he really loved. The Bible says Jesus really loved them.
He did.
So it was obviously was a chill place. So I mean, we have some challenges at the moment. They're not as great as some other people's, but they are challenges, and it's not a bad thing to remember, to look back over the things that have been given to us as gifts, which we still carry with us. They don't make everything better. They don't make everything all right.
And they may have been for a time in their lives,
they
something
might have
that,
been,
as you said, helped you over a particular bump on the journey. Really,
that's right. But they were gifts from the same place, from the source of love.
Absolutely.
So have a think. And if you can think of the best gifts you've received, we'd love to hear about that. That would be wonderful.
And we'll speak to you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.